You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi everybody, it's me again, Mighty Blue, and you are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Yep, this is my once a month show, and to be honest, I was a little rusty when I started putting this together this morning, which is Wednesday the 21st of April, by the way. I mean, I haven't done it for a while, and that was only a month. I was aware of the high bar that Ryan set taking over from me, so let's hope you're happy with my choices this month. As I often have in the past year, I've returned to the class of 2019 once more. I met such a wide variety of characters on the trail that year, and this week our guest is a woman I met pretty early on. We hiked within the vicinity of one another for a couple of weeks, I guess, but such is the power of the trail that we both have a connection that's going to be permanent. Her name is Sarah Jane Hatfield, though of course she was known to me by a trail name, which is Pringles. Sarah appeared to me to be one of those strong, independent women, which, as you know, I go on about a lot. But as you're going to hear, that wasn't how she felt herself in those early days. We're going to be hearing from Sarah about her own epic journey in a moment. Trust me on this, she has a story. Talking of strong, independent women, Katie Westling is discovering a few things about the trail that only by getting out there and doing it, you can discover. We caught up again this week, and let's just say she's learned one of the very biggest lessons that anybody can learn on this hike. As always, Katie will be on after the interview with Sarah. And finally today we had the third from last chapter in Larry Luxemburg's Walking the Appalachian Trail. Amazingly, as has happened so often with this terrific book, Larry talks about one of the issues that Katie will be talking about. The serendipity of the trail, eh? You can't beat it. So let's get to it. Here's my friend, Pringles. So today I'm returning yet again to my class of 2019. Yeah, shocker, I know. But we're going to meet one of the women I met early in Georgia and someone I hiked around for those early miles. This is Sarah Jane Hatfield, better known to me and her fellow hikers as Pringles. Hey, Pringles. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Good to hear you.
So, yeah, we had a bit of problem communicating, and it worked out in the end. And as I say, we met early on, but you'd already had your trail name, didn't you? Did you pick it yourself, or did someone on the trail christen you? Because it wouldn't be one I'd choose personally.
It was actually quite interesting how I got my trail name. I met first grader who you actually interviewed as well. And he seemed a little concerned about getting kind of a silly trail name. And he kind of like proposed this idea to me. And I was like, all right, I'm all ears. He's like, we'll observe each other for a few days. And we'll give a few names out and we can pick from those names. Like he was desperate to want to have like a multiple choice for his trail name. So he gave me a few choices, one of them being No Filter, not because I didn't filter my waters, because I really just kind of say whatever by accident. And then the other one was Stops a Lot, because I do stop a lot. So I went for Pringles because it seemed more fitting. I still eat them to this day. It's just nonstop. It's an addiction.
Well, you're something of a stream of consciousness woman, I seem to remember, and you would say things out, and get it out there, and that the whole 9 yards, which made you very, very seem incredibly confident on the trail as well.
Yeah.
And as I recall from chatting with you at the time, it was that one of the things that really struck me was that you were actually writing articles for a newspaper back home. Did you pitch them on that, or how did that come about?
Oh, it was actually quite interesting. So I'd taken the job at the newspaper with intent to save my butt off for a year to leave this job to go hiking. So I kind of kept that to myself. I didn't really want anyone to know because maybe they would just let me go because my intent was to leave anyway. But it turned out like 9 months before my leave date, the publisher, the owner of the newspaper, called me into his office. He's like, "Hey, so I hear you're going to do this trail thing." I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "You interested in writing about it?" And I was like, "Well, I won a creative writing contest in 8th grade. Let's give it a shot." So I went ahead and drafted an intro, and he absolutely loved it and said, "Give me one every week." And I'm like, "You got it." So he got 37 articles.
So, what were you doing? Were you trying to convey the story? Were you trying to convey the pain? How did you frame these things?
Well, what I did is I tried to, and it helped actually reflect on my hike. So at week's end, I would think about the most valuable thing, the most vulnerable thing, and then just try to get like a topic to write about that while including, the day to day of the week. But it turned out to be more of a storytelling kind of style, and I think that really grabbed my audience because it turned, they were able to kind of feel me being there, like they were there themselves. So it turned out, I don't know, I just felt like I was just writing from the heart. I didn't hold much back. I mean, there's only so much you can put in the newspaper, so there was a little bit of holding back. But they got,
Mm.
they just got a story, and it was a true story, and it was a beautiful story, and they were just moved by it, and I was like, it just kept me going. So
You were definitely a sharer. You told me.
yeah.
Uh, so, so the articles were quite successful, weren't they? I think you
Yeah.
won some sort of awards. Tell us about that.
Sure. So the newspaper is based out of Waynesville, North Carolina. So in North Carolina, they have what they call the NC Press Awards, obviously North Carolina Press Awards, where anything like that's published online or in print can go into competition, whether it be for graphic design, writing. I'm not sure if they have a photography category, but anyway, they submitted my stuff for editorial consideration, and I won second place among seasoned journalists that, I mean, I haven't written ever. So it was very humbling, and it was exciting. And then I wrote a second series that they're going to be submitting for 2021 as well.
Cool. So, did you feel something of an obligation when you were out on the trail? Because I seem to remember. I know that when of course, I was podcasting on the trail,
Hmm.
and the days are tough enough as it is just by themselves, aren't they? So, what was it like for you out there in terms of meeting your deadlines every week?
Sure. So like I did three big things. One, I wrote for the newspaper a weekly article. I made daily in-depth posts on a private group, which, my family and about 300 family and friends that were deeply following it. And then I also vlogged on YouTube. So what had happened is in the beginning, I prioritized to me the most important thing. And that would obviously be the newspaper because I had more people counting on that, whereas I could push some of my posts and personal stuff aside. So I just latched onto the writing regardless of what was going on. I remember a lady had asked me, she's like, "Isn't that too much pressure for you?" And I remember finding like an excuse to like, "Oh no, it's this or that." But then after like answering it probably two or three more times from separate hikers, it turned into like, no, it's not. It's a passion. It's not a problem for me to do this. It's something I'm really passionate about, and I owned it and I went with it. So,
I know some people wear that pressure. They, they,
mhm.
they definitely do. Some people wear it better than others as well. Um, and the other thing I recalled when I met you was that you were hoping to be finished by early August, as your first grandchild was being born around then. Do you think
Yep.
that was a realistic expectation? Because you started around the same time as me, or did you intend to get off and then come back a month later to finish?
That's such a great question. I'm glad you asked that. I think the biggest thing for me in the beginning was, yeah, I could do this. I'm early, I got 5, 6 months, piece of cake. But as I was getting closer, I'm like, I'm in Delaware Water Gap. By the time I actually left the trail, I was like, what, two-thirds maybe, around that. But I was having a good old time. So I realized that I knew I wasn't going to be done in time. So working really close with my daughter, who was 100% supportive. I mean, shoot, she was okay with, well, semi okay with her mom not being there for her pregnancy, which was a bummer for me. But I was not going to miss that birth, and I spent 19 days down in Florida assisting with that. So I made it happen. I don't know how, but I did.
Of course, then you better tell us about young Maverick.
Oh,
Then
Maverick, he is just a doll babe. I can't even tell you. Big old boy too. He looks just like my daughter did as a baby, and the same. We all look like identical twins, so it's pretty fun. He's got a good personality.
so, how did she feel about you being away during that pregnancy? Because that's a pretty important time. She's your only daughter, I believe,
Correct.
your
Yes,
only child. Yeah. So the timing could not have been worse for you.
I know.
Did you ever consider not going, or?
Of course. Originally, my daughter was going to hike with me. So, what had happened when she found out she was pregnant, we did the math. Her due date was, early August. I'm like, you can't be full term out there. And she's like, well, you should still, so she was very supportive. But, as the pregnancy went on, we'd FaceTime as much as possible. I mean, a lot. And so I could see her belly and watch it move and stuff. So, there were days where she was like, "I wish you were here." And then by the time we hung up, I would just be in tears because I did too, but it was the sacrifices, and these are the big ones that you do to do something like this. So
But Sarah, that is massive extra
it's,
pressure though,
yeah,
isn't it? Oh my gosh, that
it was tough.
must be a nightmare for you every
Uh-huh.
single time.
Uh-huh.
Um, and actually, if I recall correctly, this hiking wasn't really a passion of yours, was it, when you
Mm-mm.
started? How did the idea of an 80 through hike even come onto your radar in the first place? Because I know you did some car camping, I think, when you were a
Yeah,
youngster.
it's fun
Where,
stuff.
where did you hear about the? I mean, obviously living in North Carolina, you probably knew about the 80. Why did this seem a good idea to you at some stage?
Well, so I relocated to Western North Carolina in 2017, I believe it was. So when we were out there, my boyfriend at the time brought me out to Max Patch. And as anyone who's ever been there, for that to be the first place I stepped foot on the Appalachian Trail, you can't really, I don't even know how to explain it. I asked him a question. I'm like, "Yeah, I knew about this trail, like from National Geographic, that kind of thing. But what's this through hiker thing? You mean people do this all in one setting? Like how? And that's me. I'm all in or nothing. I can't, I give full credit to section hikers. I don't see how they can rekindle that to finish. I had to go all in or nothing. So that's what it was. And the second I got home, I started researching it, started watching YouTube, and learned about some stuff. And it was a year and a half later.
So, how did you prepare? Gear and logistics. Was it all on YouTube, or did you start reading through hiker books? And that was the thing that hooked me: reading through hiker books and thinking, "Oh my God, this looks so exciting!" And I always remember reading these books. I know the end date is going to be at Katahdin. Most of them going north, going to be at Katahdin sometime. And I was still excited for them as I went on during their journey while I was reading them. Did you have that experience with reading books, or did you just start asking questions, or just simply go through YouTube?
So what I did to prepare, I guess the first time I was intrigued by it was when I watched Between the Blazes, which was on YouTube, and they were hikers from 2015, I believe. I was just hooked. I was just like, okay. And then my personality type, I have to research everything. So I'm looking up, like, Google was my best friend. It was literally like, what is the best backpacking tent for this year? I didn't want to look up old articles. So I was very conscious about what the data of the material, if you will. So a lot of it was reviews, articles, not so many books, because I was concerned about, and I learned this later as I was watching too much YouTube, if you will. I was concerned about having someone else's hike in my heart. You know what I mean? If I followed too deeply how someone else did it, would I be hiking their hike in my mind, or their expectations? I was expecting to see what they expected or feel what they expected. So I literally didn't do that on purpose because I was
Ah,
nervous about invoking someone else's hike.
so you got prepared, but when we spoke before, you said a couple of things that I noted down. You said that hiking the AT either helped or destroyed you.
Amen.
What did you mean by that? Have you worked out which one of those is true?
I'm still gonna say I'm not sure which one it is true. I'm gonna say that. Mainly, I'm not sure how deep you want to go into this, but when you hike the Appalachian Trail in your 40s, and I'm not discounting any age, I think we're all dealing with different things at different age brackets. For
Mm.
me, it wasn't, oh, where am I going to be in life? 40s, in your 40s, you're unpacking stuff. Let me tell you, as a single mom, and I come from a good family, but I still come from some dark, we'll say corners. But it's when you pack it away and you've never faced them for your entire life, and then you're out there by yourself, it's actually a beautiful thing what it does to you, and it can be scary, I think, if you're unprepared to look inside yourself. I wouldn't quite say I wasn't unprepared to do that. Um, but now that I'm off trail, I'm just sitting now with all this luggage I unpacked, and I'm like, "Well, what do I do with it?" You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I'm kinda like, "Well, I know I need to address all this stuff." I didn't realize it stayed so deep in the corners of my mind. So now I think the next step is to make sure it didn't destroy me, and keep moving forward with most likely a lot more hiking, a lot more long distance hiking, because I think that's where you really get to know yourself, we'll say.
It's interesting how people take these things away and realize they've got all this time. I think it sounds like a benefit to have all this time to think. Sometimes it can be a little bit daunting to know you're going to spend 10 hours by yourself
Whew.
inside your head all the time.
Mhm.
For me, I didn't put headphones in at all during my hike for the first 800 miles when I first went. But then my thoughts inside, I started driving myself bloody crazy.
Mhm.
And so, you need to get that sort of balance. But learning about yourself is not a bad thing at
Not.
any stage, because you got to have some of these things. And I'm going to come back to that actually at the end.
Okay.
But you also said something like, you said that you weren't a hiker, but you're definitely a sharer. And I wondered how that would impact your hike, because putting a confident face on everything is great in a lot of circumstances, but the AT has a way of reducing that confidence very quickly, doesn't it? Were you properly prepared for what hit you on the trail? It isn't just the physicality, it's the mental side of it as well.
I think life has prepared me for that, and I've said this before, early, like, even in my intro article, that I feel that life gives you lessons on purpose, whether they be for something in the future or they be for something that you help someone else with in the future. Being a single mom, being able to stretch a dollar, I knew I could take that knowledge to, making a through hike affordable, which didn't end up being that way. But it's quite expensive, actually. So I think, like, just the mental background I come from, of mental strength, I say, I felt in the beginning fine and confident. I was like, yeah, I got this mental game, 50% mental, 50% physical. Bam, let's do it. Right. But then I'm like 8 to 900 miles in is where I think I really found the main mental struggle start with me, because I had a couple breaks, through trail days, and then with the birth of my grandson, I didn't get that. I mean, it was steady, but it still had a couple, like, "Ooh, I'm home and showering for a couple weeks," you know what I mean? So I don't feel like I got the solid mental breakdown early on like I think people do.
Yes, they certainly do. And I know that I had a 7-day break, I think it was, in my first journey, and I about suffered from it. But going back, as you say, sleeping in your own bed
Yeah.
and flushing toilets
Mhm.
again, it's
It's a
while it
reset.
may be fabulous for a while, yeah, but it's a terrible reset. I
Yes.
think to go back is tough,
It's damning. Yeah.
and yeah, exactly. So, but I'm glad you did that. And I know that also that you vlogged, and talking about sharing. And
Yes.
I know a lot. I know a lot of people vlog these
Mhm.
days and put themselves out there. But for women, vlogging obviously has risks.
Many.
How do you cope with some of the online nonsense? Because virtually none of the online comments are that helpful, are
No,
they?
especially if you don't know them. And I'm glad you brought that up. I I'm a sharer, like I said before, and when I vlogged, it was to if I can give back to the community, great. This is for my grandma and grandpa. This is for my family to watch, for my daughter and my grandson to document and see later on in life. So when I put my heart into that, then I just think that subscribers were lucky. Let's just say, because I'm sharing this with you. I'm not sure if that sounded right, but the biggest one, I did have my troll, but that's when you're doing something right, if someone's going to jazz you. So I tried not to let them get in my head. Happened 2 weeks in. But it kind of did a little bit because I was still naive. I was out in the middle of the woods by myself. When I say still naive, I say month one, and then past that, you're graduated past that. So
Mhm.
what I did is I focused on, again, I went back to what was more important in the sharing department, and writing the articles were most important. I continued to video and, take pictures for my videos, but I plan to upload them post hike, so that's just, and I'm on week 16 or 17 now.
That must be great to be revisiting the hike.
It's fun.
When this you're now distant from it, to see. And I found this myself when I've been listening to my own podcast of the time, and it evokes memories in me, even though I haven't even said that thing. But I can remember
Mhm.
those things, and you having photos to look at the time you took the photo. Yeah,
Let me
that's just awesome stuff.
I think the best part, real quick, I just want to touch on that about, videoing, is when I videoed, I did it in 2 styles. Like, I did a lot of B-roll, so I just wanted to film the trail, but I wanted to also make some audio notes, so I would talk to
Mm.
myself in the thing, and I never revisited it until now. Like, I never, like, looked back later on that day to make sure I captured what I want. I just, like, kept going and never looked back. So now, me going through each clip, I'm cracking myself up. I'm like, "Holy cow, this is great." And then
That
it
is
puts you there again.
awesome.
It puts you right back into it and starts making you think, "Well, what's next now?" You know?
Most certainly, yeah.
Mhm.
And And I know that you were affected, as a lot of us were, by that dreadful murder on the trail in
Mhm.
2019. Where were you when you learned of it, and were you anywhere near it? And what did you do?
So I had just made it out of the woods heading towards Trent's Groceries. So that was just, I mean, I don't have exact mileage, but I know the FBI shut off like 12 or 24 miles of the trail. I was like, I'd camped like 5 miles outside of that. So I was just outside
Right.
of it. But my hiking partner, who I ended up with, they had had some encounters with a guy. But I tell you what, when something like that happens to the trail, I I can't even describe the quietness. Um, no one was on trail. The thing to do was to stop. Trail days was happening, a couple weeks later, and it turned into a different, like the AT Strong movement happened, and every hiker took you on, and they loved you, and everybody was healing each other, and you stopped for 2 weeks. That's what happened.
Yeah, we didn't, because we were about 400 or 500 miles
Yeah, if
ahead
you
of it
were way up there,
at
yeah,
the
but when you're
time.
in that
But we all
section right
felt it.
there,
We all felt it very personally,
oof,
though. It really impacted the trail. So
it's scary.
you you stopped and you went to trail days
Mhm.
and you did work for stay and stuff like that. And you met a new hiking partner, didn't
Yes,
you?
I did.
What happened?
So that was Broccoli Rob. I met him at Angels Rest Hikers Haven, where I'd stopped for 2 weeks. And that was what, mile marker 637. We hiked out of there together. And we even went and ran that hostel for a year and a half afterwards. I just moved to Florida and we're putting him back on trail here shortly. So he's still a huge part of my life. Love him to death.
Why is he? Why is he Broccoli Rob? By the way, it's a great
Well,
name.
it depends on who asks sometimes. So we'll just say it's from The Office. There's a character in there, his name's Rob, and it's like Broccoli Rob, so it just kind of was catchy and cool. Um,
Great name.
Off
Great name.
audio
Uh,
edit, it's mainly a marijuana reference, we'll say.
right. Oh, nice. So, so you left Angels Rest,
Mhm,
and I'm looking at my notes here that you had a 70-mile gap, and then you had a 270-mile gap because of the birth.
mhm.
So you left the trail and then kept coming back. So you went, and the 270-mile gap was for the birth. You then met up again with Brocky Rob and hiked forward.
Correct.
Um, so, but then you got injured, didn't you?
Yes,
So
pretty
tell us
bad.
about that, because it wasn't a good injury, was it?
Pretty bad. So the gaps leading up to where I fell were intended to be done after we summited. It was kind of like we'll goof off for the last 2 weeks after we summited to nail down whatever I had
Sure.
left over. But
Yeah.
after falling about a half a mile past the Maine state line, or is it a half a mile before that first shelter in Maine going north? You know the scramble when you hit it, but I should take my pack off. That's all I got to say. And the entire trail, I never had that feeling that I should take this pack off to traverse down this rock scramble. And it ended up
Yeah.
being a bad decision. I scooted down on my knees were up to my chest, and I'm sitting there, and the pad and my sleep and my tent were kind of at the bottom of my, where you strap them on the outside of your pack, and it was kind of pushing me forward. So I felt
Yeah.
the need to take the pack off. Went to go reposition to pull myself up, started falling forward. So I just knew to focus on that. And it lasted forever. I flipped 3 times. I kept my eyes open so I could take account of where I was falling, what I was hitting, and then the stop was my leg, and I slammed my leg on a big rock, and I've had this ginormous hematoma still on my right upper leg.
Jeez.
And that was like a year and a half ago almost. And my face, it got a big old, it was bad. It was pretty bad.
So what was the upshot of the fall? Did you, if it was that bad, which it obviously was,
Mhm.
and you actually refer to it as a trauma fall, which
Yes,
sounds awful.
very.
What did you do? How'd you get out of there?
So I knew I fell down half of the scramble, and I knew there was another half, and I knew there was a shelter coming up, even though I had no intent of stopping there because I had other hiking plans that day. So I literally crawl on my butt all the way until I'm off this rock scramble and I'm able to stand up. And I stood up and just kind of took my time. I could see my face swelling up, and I knew that I was only going on adrenaline. So I had to use all my adrenaline and hope that there was someone at that shelter. So not a single hiker
Oh,
around. I get there, and there's a young lady working the privy for the American Mountain Club, or American Mountain AMC, yes. And
yeah.
she was ready to radio for a helicopter and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, no, just where are you? Can you get me to town? So she was like a mile and a half parked down a service road. And she happily drove me into Bethel where I'd met up with some friends. So, and eventually went to the emergency room, and I was completely body scanned, MRI'd, and nothing. I was 100% lucky, not a chipped tooth or broken bone, just hematoma the size of, I don't know, a watermelon.
Wow, that sounds terrible. So you had to return home.
I did.
How did you feel? Were you defeated, or did you think you'd ever return?
I spent after the fall, I thought that I just needed a week recovery. Yeah, right. So
Mm.
I went ahead and paid for Airbnb, had it for 6 days. Day 2, I knew it was done. So I just spent those rest of those days in solitude. Broccoli did actually come visit me for that day. He like left the trail and spent a day with me, and it's like, no, go finish. I got this. Yeah, it was very defeating because I was also sharing with the community that I feel like I owed them a summit pick, at one point. But luckily, that newspaper was very supportive. I wrote 2 other pieces, one about leaving the trail. It was a big in-depth piece, and then just some other things. So I was able to, I guess, reflect through my writing on that.
So, by the way, before we move on, you said you refer to him as Broccoli. Do you call him Broccoli?
I do. I call him Broccoli. We're in the middle of the store, and people just, I'm like, Broccoli. And I'm like, ooh, it's right. We're in like normal places. I call him Broccoli, and he doesn't. I called him Rob one time. He's like, no, no, no. And I was like, okay, sorry. I don't think I've ever heard him
That's
say
hilarious.
Sarah. So
That is hilarious.
it's
That is
great.
funny. But you were off the trail, and you weren't sure what was going to happen. But did you? We then had COVID, so you couldn't go back on the trail, or perhaps you decided not to. So, what were your plans for 2020? But how did you change them?
So I think I was very lucky and fortunate to have been able to have taken a management position at this hostel that freed me up to not have that obligation to not be able to go back that year.
Sure.
COVID happened. I pushed my date back. I really kept an eye on the forums and what people were doing, and I didn't want to be disrespectful to the trail or the communities because I too was a trail community, and I too wanted to do what I wanted hikers to do for us. So with that in mind, my CDC training and all that kind of fun stuff to run this hiker hostel, I took that knowledge with me on trail, and I was the best I could be, the most respectful. Didn't stay in town too much, and if I did, I had my mask and I didn't touch stuff too much, and because I want to be respectful. But it was a whole different experience, I tell you that much, from our 19 hike.
So, what was it like going back past the spot where you fell? But did you? I mean, was that traumatic for you itself? Because I would think going down the same place, thinking if exactly the same thing happens,
Mhm,
I'm in real trouble.
mhm.
So, what was it like for you?
So I've explained it like this before, like when something traumatic happens and you in your imagination, if you will, your mind's eye, you see this being the biggest rock scramble you've ever seen. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, if this thing is this big, I'm gonna be pretty upset, right? So
Mm.
in order to get back to that spot, I had to repeat 17 trail miles. So I got on Ngorum and I repeated 17 trail miles, very anxious. Um, I knew I was confident physically, but I think the mental game played. Like, what if you fall? Are you going to take a different route? Will you, maybe I was mapping it out too much, not for failure, but for what's the best way to now do this? You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I met
Yeah.
Reboot the day before, an older hiker gentleman. He was very curious about my hiking story, and I told him. And he's like, "When you're back out here?" I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't want a year to go by. 11 months, got to get back out." And he was just intrigued. And later on at camp that night, he approached and said, "We're going to hike with you past that." And as he walked back to his tent, I couldn't help but just tear up. I mean, it was very beautiful. That's a fellow hiker right there.
This has all been a very emotional trip for you, hasn't it?
Mhm.
And I'm going to make it even more emotional because then eventually you do eventually get to Katahdin.
Mhm.
Tell us about that day, because that must have been, because you set out in February 2019.
Mhm.
When did you get to Katahdin, and what was it like?
Sure. So 50 miles prior to Katahdin, I think it's very important to say, I got a big surprise. Hiking southbound was Broccoli Rob. So he drove all the way up from Georgia, or all the way up from Virginia from the hostel to surprise me in the 100
Nice.
Mile Wilderness. So he finished the rest of the hike with me. So that on top of the world, I couldn't even imagine doing that with anybody else. So, but besides that, October 4th, 2020 is when I summited Katahdin. And I tell you what, it was a cloudy day, the days that you don't want, you always fantasize having this perfect, beautiful blue sky. But what I've learned on trail about myself is I do have a slight case of, I guess, of vertigo. So if I'm that high up against a flat wall of rock holding on to rebarb and I can see the land before me, there might have been a problem for me. I'm guessing. So to have that white
Mhm.
wall, it was kind of like, let's focus on what's under your feet, not your hands right now, and I think that's really, besides Broccoli Rob, what pushed me up that mountain. It was, to date, the toughest climb, physically, mentally, just all of it. That you spend all these, I spent a year and a half planning, but technically 3 years of this trail for me was coming to this moment, right? This one tiny moment that came
Yeah.
and came and went. It came and went so fast. I can remember every bit of it, but it's the million of experiences and the moments leading up to that one particular moment that I think I took away from the trail.
And was it enough for you? Was touching the sign enough? Did you feel that that was the end of your journey and you're over with hiking, or you're over with this particular journey? Or was there something within you thinking, this is just the beginning for me?
Oh, that just proved to me that I could do that. That was it. Yeah. There's no like, okay, I'm gonna go home and do nothing now. No. I don't think anyone that touches that Katahdin sign takes that and say, okay, nothing else for me after this. It's I'm not done. I'm not done at all. I can't help. Remember I told you I have all this luggage, I gotta repack it or something. Gotta finish her up.
That's what I want to go back to now. So let's go back to what we talked about earlier, whether you were helped or destroyed. And when we spoke last week, you told me that all the time you had to think on the trail allowed you to work out a few things.
Mhm.
And I've been thinking a lot about this recently, about how we're always distracted in life, aren't we? Do you think that you actually needed that hike to allow you to think about what you referred to as your 40 years of burying stuff?
For sure. It allows you to hate yourself, love yourself, respect yourself, believe in yourself, all in like multiple days. Like, and how can you handle that? When you're like, is it beating you up? Can I mentally take my own punches? You know what I'm saying? But I think I was able to, and what it did is it built a stronger confidence in me for sure. I don't feel like I answered that question.
That's good. That's good. So now what we're going to do something I've been doing recently with hikers. I'm going to ask you to finish off quickly with just one word answers or something like that. Okay.
Okay.
So you ready for this?
Yes.
Tent, hammock, or shelter?
Tent.
Right. Maine or New Hampshire?
Ooh. Maine.
Right.
Maine is my final
um,
answer.
right. Your favorite day?
Any day from my aqua blaze. July 1st, we'll say.
Right. You definitely recognize, right. And your least favorite day? I should imagine that's pretty easy to say, the one you fell, isn't it?
Oh, no, I'm not gonna say that that's my least favorite day. I think I needed that to happen. My least favorite day was day 1, I think, because that was my least favorite person of, the image of myself. I didn't like who started, she was confident on the outside, not on the inside, I can tell you that much. But the one that stands before you is the one that I love, so but that day 1, mm-mm.
Wow, that is something, because you did present an incredibly confident image. And but you didn't like, so I mean, and I think people have said this before. The AT doesn't, it reveals you, doesn't it? So, and I think
Yes.
that's what it's done for you as well. Your best view.
Klingman's Dome.
The correct answer
Uh-oh.
was broccoli Rob coming towards me.
Yes! In 100 Mile Wilderness when Broccoli Rob came towards me. Yes, that one.
Right, we're going with that now, shall we? I might be able to cut that. I don't know. We'll see. Your favorite hostel?
There are many, many hostels on the Appalachian Trail. I am a little biased, but I will always, always love Angels Rest Hikers Haven in Pearisburg, Virginia.
Of course you will.
I love it. But not only because I work there, it's spacious. I like all the common areas that are like there's multiple and you can kind of have your own space anywhere. So I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it's a real good setup there. Anyway, And what was your favorite meal the whole trip?
Like trail meal or town meal?
Any meal that you had on the trail.
Bacon cheeseburgers.
Never a wrong choice.
Never.
Uh, and what about a meal that you're never, ever going to want to eat again?
Ugh, I am not touching Cliff Bars ever again. Blech. Blech.
Shoes or boots?
Shoes.
Okay. And last two, did you filter all of your water?
Every bit. Even
Cool.
town water.
Oh, really? And did you ever deliberately sleep with your food bag as opposed to hanging it or storing it?
I love that you asked this question. I really hope you ask this of everyone. I slept with my food every night.
No.
I had a bear
Really?
can
Why?
I had a bear can for the first 800 miles.
Yeah.
They're gonna hang me for this. Come on now. I feel there's a lot of debate. I believe hung food or food piñatas. I've seen it many times where you see the bear scat that has all the wrappers in it. That's because the bear is getting your food. I've scared two off from my tent and I still have my food. So
that's interesting. You're the first person who said you never
Really?
saw it. That's amazing.
Let me tell you, they're lying to you.
That
There's
is
no
very
one.
cool.
No one's doing it in the end.
Well, look, it's been great to see you again. I didn't know what had happened to you until we connected on Facebook. I didn't know what you'd finished. You'd had this adventure. You've been running a hostel. You met a guy. I mean, really, you had quite the emotional roller coaster on this trip, and I really thank you for coming on and sharing it with us.
Betcha. Thank you so much for having me. It was beautiful to talk about it again, and good to see your face again.
And yours. Take it easy, all right?
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I think we've talked about this before. You can come on the trail and present yourself in any way that you wish. Virtually nobody else there knows you, and you even give yourself a new name. Pringles truly gave out a cool, relaxed vibe, but as you heard, she wasn't that way inside. The trail gave that to her, and she feels entirely different today. I was so pleased to be able to bring her on the show to demonstrate not only that transformation, but also how some people find things on the trail that they never knew that they needed. And Pringles found broccoli. You've got to admit it, calling your love interest broccoli will take a bit of getting used to, unless, of course, he called you Pringles. Since I announced last week that I'm heading out for my third times the charm stab at the John Muir Trail, I've had lots of emails of encouragement and advice on how to do it successfully. I'm always grateful for this, so thank you. And I welcome any of you who have anything to say to me on this or any other subject to email me at steve@hikingradionetwork.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and I try my hardest to respond to every email that I get. And while we're on the subject of thanks go to the show's monthly donors, Vicky Thomason and Todd Withrow, while Rushali Kadam, Kathy Tarr, William Matthews and Lisa Work have also donated generously. Thanks to one and all. You really are helping to keep this boat afloat. Now it's Katie, or Phoenix, and she has certainly learned an important lesson this week. Here she is. So we're back on with Katie. Hey Katie, how are you?
Good morning, Steve. Well, probably have been better, but we're working on it. We're working on it.
Yes. Now, the last time we spoke, you were a few miles short of hot springs, and I think in the last 6 days you've gone forward about 18 miles because you got off at Allen Gap about 15 miles past hot springs. And so tell us, what's been happening?
So I think I had mentioned before that I was starting to have some issues with my knees.
Yep.
And so I was able to slack pack part of the distance before Hot Springs, and then came out of Hot Springs with a full pack and stayed at, I think it's Mountain Springs Shelter, So that was about a 10.5-mile day. And the next morning, I was really feeling it in my knees. And so I just, took a slow day, kind of hung out around the shelter, and then just made the decision that I had to get off and take care of my knees. So
But I thought the plan, and before you get to that, I thought the plan had been to actually stay in Hot Springs, and some friends were going to visit you, weren't they?
I did do that. Yes. I took 1-0. I just took 1-0 day in Hot Springs, and so
I thought you were going to give yourself a bit more time. Actually, that was my understanding from last week. So that didn't happen. That didn't happen. They stayed for a day, and you took a day off then. So you headed back out. So did that day give you any help, or did you immediately start feeling the knees again?
Wonderful. It was a wonderful day. I went to the mineral baths and, just soaked for probably about an hour and a half and just did nothing. But I was still, it really, I could still feel it in the knees, when you're feeling that kind of pain that you can't really appreciate where you are and what you're doing,
right?
You have to pay attention to it. And so I've been off for a few days now, icing, and I've ordered braces and like some supports for my knees, and starting to do some stretches.
Where are you staying now then?
I'm in, where am I? I'm in Johnson City, Tennessee.
All right.
So, but my plan is, and I've already booked a shuttle back to the trail for Thursday, in the hopes that I will have addressed this and taken care of it. And,
yeah. We're speaking Tuesday, and it's I want to actually refer back to an email that you sent me this week. So I hope you don't mind me sharing it.
Yeah.
I'm going to read it. It says,
"No, not at all."
I can't remember what my question was, but you wrote yes, of course. And I said I've decided, and you said I've decided to get off trail for at least 3 days to ice my knee and explore knee supports. It's the right thing to do, which, by the way, is absolutely right. I have not really given it what it needs. Said goodbye to my hiking partner, but we will check on each other. I must change my approach and work with the trail. It cannot be conquered. And then you did a smiley emoji. Rather than thinking about it, I'm not sure what that meant. Rather than thinking about it starting over every time, I like to think of myself as learning and adapting and being resilient. Just as I expect when you hike the John Muir Trail this time, you will not do it the same as you did it the last 2 times. So
right.
You're learning this from the trail, from your experience on the trail. Do you find that, what's the word for it? Humiliating isn't the word, but do you find that makes you a little bit despondent, or are you happy to now effectively be taught by the trail how you're meant to approach it?
Steve, I think honestly, it's a little of both. I go through moments where I am feeling very frustrated. You set your miles, you say where you have this idea of where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And then boom, your body says, no, you're not. So that part has been frustrating. But then, I really listen to some of the wisdom of people like yourself and my cousin Nancy, other individuals who have through hiked, and I understand that there's no other way than to let the trail teach you and to make the changes that you have to make, and mainly changes in your approach and your attitude. So I'm just, I'm kind of just watching now. I'm watching to see, what happens with my knees, get back on as soon as I can, and go forward from there. Maybe reduce the miles for several days. And
well, I think not having a plan to say I'm going to do 20 miles today, or 10 miles, or even 3 miles today, whatever the plan is, just walk as well as you can walk. And if you can't, just don't do it. Just settle down. I'm just kind of, I worry always when I'm on the trail that I might injure myself beyond a level at which I can come back at all. So I'm always kind of aware of that. And I know that when I got bitten by the dog back in 2014, I just felt as I was walking down from Joe's, I can't remember his last name, Joe's place in at Four Pines. I was walking down the road towards back to get back in the woods, and I had about a couple of 100 yards, I guess, to think, I'm not sure I can make this. It's 25 miles to Daleville over a couple of days. I didn't think I could make it, and I went to urgent care. And the woman in urgent care said to me, "You wouldn't have made it." So that would have been bad.
Right.
So, you just have to, I think when you get back on that trail, you just have to see what it will let you do. And try to, you've got to keep enjoying it. I mean, that's the other thing, I mean, have you considered going home at all since you started? I know you're going to go, you've got this determination to start again on Thursday. Have you considered, I need to carry on or what?
Okay, so I will tell you the reason that I'm staying in a hotel is so I won't be tempted to go home.
Good.
But then I also have a little granddaughter who says, "Can I come over to your apartment now?" And not now. So, honestly, I want to walk. I just want to walk. And I want to walk through the woods, and I want to watch spring unfold. That is the essence of where I am. And so it's kind of gone beyond, how many miles can I bag?
Sure.
The mythical Katahdin,
Yeah, don't even think about
there.
that. It's miles away.
Right. Somewhere out there in the future. But for me, the essence is I want to walk through the mountains. I want to walk on the Appalachian Trail, and I want to watch spring unfold as I do it. And that is what has given me the most joy in all of this. So that connecting with all the amazing people I have met, my gosh.
Yes,
and so
it's an eye-opener, isn't it? It's an eye-opener.
Yeah, that's where I am. I'm ready to get back on and just walk and just, connect with the people and connect with where I am.
Yeah. Have you been feeling any obligation to stay on because, of the support? You are getting a lot of support, and our listeners, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. You're just always thinking, what is the right thing for me to do? Hopefully that's what you're thinking.
That is exactly what I'm thinking. So that's why I got off on, I think, Saturday afternoon after hiking out. Right. And, I feel like I need to make sure my knees are in order.
Yeah,
and,
damn right.
And then go from there.
Yeah. And funnily enough, I know you're upset or disappointed to your hiking partner has moved on, obviously. But you know what? As you just alluded to it, there's amazing people out there. Literally every day you're going to see more and more amazing people, and you'll find another hiking partner and you'll enjoy that time, and then that person will move on, or you'll move on and they'll get injured. You just never know how it goes. And I want to, by the way, while we're talking about support, I'd love to thank listeners publicly now, and I'm sure you'd like to echo this as well, who've reached out to give trail magic to you or asking to walk with you when you come through their area. I mean, that sort of support you don't get in normal life, do you? It's just a lovely thing that's, the kindness of strangers is a constant reminder of how magical this walk is, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you never know when it's coming or where it's coming from.
No, that's right. Yeah.
So it is amazing.
Yeah, well, look,
it is amazing.
I'm glad you've taken this time. Is it now? You've been off your feet now for it's Sunday, Monday. It's now Tuesday. It's now the third day, I guess, third or fourth day.
Yes.
How are they feeling? How are your knees feeling right now?
Well, this morning I could tell there was a much improvement.
Good.
My plan is I have a couple of more days. So I'm icing, and then I'm going to just start some light stretching to loosen up everything. And
fingers crossed.
Go from there.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
That's
well,
right.
Look, I'm so glad you've made that decision not to go home and stay where you are. Or had you made the decision to go home, you bought a return ticket to make sure you did come back.
No.
Yeah. I think you need to have that mindset, don't you?
That's right. And I've read, it's harder to come back when you go home. So I am, especially if you're hurt. I mean, if you go home for some family function, that's one thing. And I have that in the works several weeks out. But no, I would rather address it here so that I am encouraged to get back on.
That's
and
good.
I'm looking forward to getting back on.
That's cool. Well, I'm looking forward to speaking to you with 3 or 4 days of hiking and good knees under your legs, or as it were, or in your legs, and we'll talk again next week, okay?
All right, Steve. Thanks a bunch.
Cheers then. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
And that's the lesson, really. You can't ever take this trail on. It kind of makes you adapt to it. And I think Katie expressed it perfectly. She now knows what she must do, and though there is regret of losing a hiking partner, she knows that she must hike her own hike and do what's best for her, not for anybody else. So I'm glad that she's understood that. To be fair, she hasn't had an extended period of hiking so far that would allow her to get into the rhythm that we've talked about on the show in the past. When she gets that rhythm, she'll definitely recognise it. And while we're on the subject of adjusting to the trail and not expecting it to adjust to you, that is one of the lessons that we get in this week's chapter of Larry Luxemburg's book. So listen out for that in a moment. But just before we get onto the book, I want to let you all know that I've been building my new author's website this month, and it should be live by Thursday, though maybe not till Friday. You can find it at steveadamsauthor.com, and there you're going to see my 3 books. 2 of them are the story of my 2014 hike, while the other one is a shorter book that's more of a taster about the trail, and you can get that one for free. There's also a link on the book pages that allow you to read a chapter from the books to see if you like the way I write, so I hope that you check them out. You're also going to see that I've got brand new covers for all 3 books. These were done by a previous guest on the podcast, Jessie Crawford. She's a designer, and I kept her in mind when I wanted to rebrand everything. She even put together covers for my next 2 hiking books, about my 2018 hike on the Camino and my second AT hike in 2019. These aren't written yet, but they will be one day. I've got to write a book that suits these great covers. I hope that you check it all out. Now, on to walking the Appalachian Trail, and I noticed this week that many of the lessons people took from the trail 30-odd years ago are very similar to those we learn today. I think that's kind of comforting, don't you? Ryan will see you next week. I'm going to see you next month. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Advice and regrets. Now is the time to take possession of my life, to start the impossible, a journey to the limits of my aspirations, for the first time to step toward my loveliest dream. If I had only known then what I know now, but now I know enough to begin. Hugh Prather, Notes on Love and Courage. In February 1980, a southbound through hiker, the Monk, made an entry in the Gooch Gap Trail Register a day or 2 before finishing his hike at Springer. He'd hiked alone for 43 days, sometimes through snow up to his waist. His advice: define your own trip in terms of quality, in terms of why, what you'll hope to learn, and then hike it. Don't let yourself hike someone else's trip, and don't let others hike yours. And if the trip begins being something different than you anticipated, you'll know you're doing it the right way. He went on, I've really been hiking on pure excitement lately, but I'm not just hiking to Springer. I'm going home as well, after 7 years. I turned 30 on February the 13th, and the trip was sort of a present to myself. I never realised it would be the most profound experience in my life. It will have a vast effect on the rest of it as well. But now it's time to retreat, to pause, to understand what I've done to myself. Southbound winter hikers are an especially tough, independent breed, putting up with extended loneliness and harsh weather. But the Monk's basic advice applies to northbounders too. Some hikers end up regretting that others swayed them to hike faster or slower than they wanted, to blue blaze, or to hurry out of towns. Enjoy people's company, the Monk is saying, but don't let them dictate the terms. There's a joy in companionship, but there's a price too. The most common piece of advice from veteran thru hikers regarding the AT is do it. Few who've completed the trail regret it, and most regard a thru hike as one of the highlights of their lives. It's the most wonderful thing I've ever done, said Laurie, a travelling Wilbury, Mac. It was so incredible I'd recommend it to anybody. Through hikers can focus so much on finishing the trail that they forget to enjoy themselves along the way. Although you do have to be serious about your mileage to finish, many hikers wish they'd taken longer, made more time for people along the way, and done a few more side trips. Many regret not taking a full 6 months to do the trail. A lot of Type A driven people now want to go back and enjoy the trip, said Connor Carolina Cooker's Coward. Pete Woulda Coulda Shoulda, Susie, took his nickname from the common desire of thru hikers to plan big hiking days. We'd get up in the morning and we'd say, we should do 20 miles today, and we never would. Then sitting around the shelter at night, we'd say we could have if we'd wanted to. Hikers offer conflicting advice about how much physical preparation to do before a hike. Physical conditioning doesn't hurt, but it's unclear how much it helps. Jogging and climbing steps are favourite pre-hike exercises, but some thru hikers simply start slowly and get in shape on the trail. Besides, it's difficult to prepare for hiking 10 hours a day up and down steep mountains with a heavy pack on your back. You have to get into hiking condition, said Mike Hago Harrington. If you're going to do enough to get into hiking condition, you might as well hike the trail. He and his wife, Nancy, had run for years, but they found the muscles needed for hiking were altogether different. Before her thru hike, Laurie Mountain Laurel Podaiga worked as an office temporary in Washington, D.C. To get in shape, I'd take my backpack to these nice offices, and at lunchtime I'd strap my hiking boots on, put my pack on, and climb up and down 13 flights of stairs. Some people I was working with had never seen a backpack before. People were just amazed at what I was doing. Like many hikers, Mike Harrington emphasised the importance of having boots that fit and breaking them in properly. Every year, hikers endure unnecessary misery or drop off the trail because they don't take these simple precautions. Mike also pointed out that you can keep improving your backpacking skills as you hike the AT. There are always people on the AT who know more than you about hiking and are willing to help. The main thing is every ounce counts, said Joe Cool Breeze Fennelly. First-time thru hikers always bring too much gear and have to mail it home. You need to keep in mind you're going to feel it every step of the way. Keep it light, simple. We were going into stores and asking how much it weighed before we'd ask how much it cost, said Mike Harrington. The peculiar thing is that despite quantum improvements in backpacking gear in the last decade, pack weights haven't changed much in a century and a half. It's hard to boil your life's possessions down to a tight, light bundle that fits on your back. For every technological advance that lightens a backpacking load, there seems to be a new piece of equipment to even the score. There is a never-ending conflict between the desire for creature comforts and for lighter loads, particularly when the extra pounds quell the rumblings in your belly. As Earl Schaefer put it, carry as little as possible, but choose that little with care. The backpacker's dilemma is this: how to take sufficient creature comforts and emergency items without making it such a burden that you won't get there or it won't be fun. You need to prepare for medical emergencies, drastic changes in weather. Snow is possible every month of the year on Mounts Washington and Katahdin, and extra food in case of injuries. Although the AT's elevations are low, the trail passes through serious mountains, which deserve respect. These are not the Himalayas, but neither should they be trifled with. People who make the mistake of doing so suffer serious consequences. Sometimes the lighter gear or food may be more expensive. Most people weigh these trade-offs continually. A 1953 PATC Bulletin article entitled "So You Think Your Gear is Really Light?" says, "Going light is really an old concept that we moderns have too often overlooked." No doubt Kane, on his long trip to Africa, was the first practitioner in this field. The article refers to the go light ideas of 19th century outdoorsman George Washington Nessmuk Sears. His pack weighed less than 30 pounds, about the same as those of pioneer AT hikers in the 1940s and 1950s, who considered themselves lightweight backpackers. In his book, Woodcraft, Sears admonished, "Go light, the lighter the better, so that you have the simplest material for health, comfort and enjoyment. My own load, including canoe, extra clothing, blanket bag, 2 days' rations, pocket axe, rod and knapsack, never exceeded 26 pounds. And I went prepared to camp out any and every night. To reduce your weight below Nessmuk's 26 pounds, you will probably have to rely on others, hike fast and severely limit creature comforts." An early ATC booklet, Suggestions for Appalachian Trail users, stated that keeping weight down cannot be overemphasized. Learn what you can do without. A seminar at the founding ATC meeting in 1925 covered lightweight gear. Charlie Trivet of Damascus recalls helping Susan Gale Airy when she hiked the trail in 1976. She weighed 90 pounds and her pack weighed 45. I took her down to the post office, he said. She was going to lighten her pack. She put a few things in an envelope, just a few ounces of stuff. She thought she was going to really lighten her pack. She couldn't understand it. Tears were coming out. She said, "You mean that's all I'm getting rid of?" Of course, pack weight will fluctuate considerably. Water weighs 2 pounds per quart, and a hiker uses perhaps 2 pounds of food a day. Resupplying for a week on the trail can add 15 to 20 pounds. Wet gear weighs more than dry. Winter gear can add 10 more pounds. Hikers should carry plenty of water or know where they can find it. This could be 1 or 2 quarts, depending on temperature and terrain. Some experienced hikers who know the area don't carry water, but that's risky. You can spend a miserable day without water, even endangering your health. Information about how to prepare for a thru hike is now readily available. Many detailed guides and videos have been produced in the past 5 years. Experienced hikers also are willing to give advice. Alders Gathering each October has workshops on various trails, and Trail Days in Damascus in mid-May is a good chance to visit with past and present backpackers. Some people advocate a shakedown hike of at least a few days to try out your body and equipment. A hike that is a shorter version of the AT is Vermont's Long Trail. At 260 miles with many different climbs, it might take 3 weeks to complete. Some thru hikers have taken courses from Warren Doyle's Appalachian Trail Institute, the National Outdoor Leadership School, NOLS, and wilderness instructor Tom Brown. While the courses aren't essential, some hikers say they gained the confidence to do the trail, and new skills added to their enjoyment of the AT. Information, books and guides are available from ATC, P.O. Box 807, Harpers Ferry, West Virginia 25425 0807. With so much information available, some hikers warn, there is a risk in overplanning. Stay as flexible as you can with your daily schedule, equipment, food and goals, they advise. The passing seasons and changing terrain, as well as your own needs, will demand adjustments. For example, you may decide you don't want to do the whole trail. Keep in mind that a successful trip is one that you enjoy. Many hikers who do not complete the AT their first try went on to do many long hikes. Proper attitude, desire and commitment are essential for a successful thru hike. Adjust to the trail instead of expecting the trail to adjust to you. Be positive. Anticipate the good times ahead instead of concentrating on current misery. Know what you hope to accomplish and what you don't. Before quitting the trail, sleep on it. One hiker advises waiting until the next town before making a final decision. If you don't miss the trail after 48 hours in town, perhaps it is time to drop off. Don't worry about finding a partner for an AT thru hike. Show up at spring or at peak time and you'll find plenty of potential partners. Laurie Mack, who separated from her partner after a few weeks, recommends not picking anyone ahead of time. You don't need a hiking partner. The best place to find one is on the trail. Don't go too fast for your capabilities. If you're not sleeping well and not recovering in the morning from yesterday's hike, you may be pushing too hard. Experienced backpackers conserve energy whenever they're not hiking, hardly moving a muscle without good purpose. Be sure to inspect your injuries right away and take corrective action. Untended injuries can get worse. Many hikers who let their blisters fester have been forced to drop off the trail. Wash your socks and feet frequently. Use tape and moleskin when necessary. Recently, ibuprofen has emerged as the non-prescription painkiller and anti-inflammatory of choice on the AT. Many hikers aren't prepared for the expense of a thru hike. A rough rule of thumb now is $1 to $1.50 per mile. A lot depends on a hiker's tastes and how much time he spends in towns. Save enough money before the hike so you can splurge in town, advises Bob, Sweet Pea Lafoot Hill. I was constantly worried about having enough money. You should be able to splurge in towns. That can make the difference in terms of your enjoying the trip. I would have enjoyed the trail more if I'd had the money. Henry Phillips, a former teacher, said, "It would be great for kids to do the trail right out of high school. It will give them an edge on everything they do for the rest of their life. It's a shame more people don't do it." Some advice for parents and friends. Keep in touch. Letters, cards, packages and telephone calls from home are an important connection to the outside world. New hikers should bear in mind that when they get information on distances and difficulty from people along the way, it will often be wrong. One problem is that miles seem longer on ascent than on descent. Sometimes place names can mislead a hiker. Agony Grind and Rattlesnake Mountain can strike terror into one's heart, but the reality is that Agony Grind, though steep, is short, and you are unlikely to see anything slithering at Rattlesnake Mountain. 3 useful trail items are gaiters to keep socks and lower legs drier and cleaner, plastic coffee can lids to form mice trying to reach suspended food bags, and mosquito netting to deter man-eating bugs. Peter, the Cheshire Cat Van Huy, carries a 10-ounce bug-proof sleep screen. Laurie, the umbrella lady Adkins, who has hiked all over the country, advocates an umbrella as the best rain protection. Most hikers, however, prefer the traditional rain suits and ponchos. Most through hikers hitchhike at least a few times to towns for supplies. Exercise caution in accepting rides. Try to look as clean and presentable as possible before sticking your thumb out. Keep your backpack nearby and look like a hiker. Many people near the trail know that hikers hitchhike and are used to giving them rides. As an alternative to hitchhiking, it's sometimes possible to request a ride from someone in a parking lot. Give some thought to adjusting to life after the trail. It may require almost as much preparation as the through hike. In the excitement of hiking the AT, the aftermath is often ignored. Rick Hancock says to remember that every day is not going to be fun-filled, but that you're out there to enjoy yourself. It's your hike, it's no one else's. Those days when you only feel like hiking 5 miles, just hike 5 miles. Don't get into that trap where you feel you have to get to this shelter or that campsite. Just go. Just do it, said Luke, the journeyman we check. Don't get bogged down on the hows, the whats or the whys. Just go. That all comes into focus when you do it, when you get out there. There's no amount of advice or training or planning that anybody can offer you. Once you get out there, you'll learn it. And that's part of the fun, the learning process. Just go and let me know when you go. I might want to join you, he said. Above all, don't break stride, don't backtrack, and don't step in any wet cow pies. Profile: Mark Second Wind Di Micheli. If anyone is a natural through hiker, it might be Mark Di Micheli. Just as some people have a special aptitude for baseball or the piano, so do some people flourish on the trail. A 5-time through hiker, Mark came to the AT in 1983 and did his last trip in 1990. He lives along the Hudson River, north of New York City. In the course of a 4-hour discussion, our conversation shifted swiftly from Indian arrowheads along the trail to the best hiking socks, to the meaning of life. When you have a successful through hike on the AT, it's like a jewel inside of you. And whatever you do afterwards, no matter how bad things get, you've always got that jewel you can take out, Mark Di Micheli said. Maybe it's just a shelter you spent one night at out of the rain, and you were happy that you were dry, or maybe it's just a turn on the trail, and you don't even remember where it was. Maybe it was some time you were sitting under a tree having some cold water. But that's your jewel. That's the oasis in your head that you can always pull out when times get tough. It's a wonderful thing to have. Mark says the key to enjoying the hike is learning to pace yourself, especially on hills, which you should climb slowly but steadily. Anticipate the pace you'll be going by the top and keep that the whole way up. That way, you won't wear yourself out, you won't get frustrated. Ultimately, you'll make better time and you'll build yourself into better shape. Most people, he says, race up a mountain, walking until they're huffing and out of breath. Then they stop, catch their breath, and run another 100 yards up the mountain. It's self-defeating, he said, because every mountain you come to is a headache more than a pleasure. His beginning pace feels slow, but he won't have to stop. If you have to stop to catch your breath, he suggests, you're walking too fast. When you're in good shape, you should be able to walk from the bottom to the top of every mountain on the AT without stopping. He says, I'm not saying don't stop, but don't let the mountain break you. Stop when you want to stop. And once you do that, it becomes money in the bank. You know when you get to any mountain, that mountain belongs to you. It's a good feeling. It's the whole key to backpacking when you know how to pace yourself. I didn't do it automatically. I used to kill myself. I was a real bang your head against the wall guy. I used to run up every mountain. Mountain, here I come. It was not intelligent. Then one year he learned his lesson. A policeman had been killed on Snowbird Mountain just north of the Great Smokies, and the killer was on the trail. Helicopters flew overhead. Mark decided to hike with a couple for safety. What more could a guy who just killed a cop want than somebody walking through the woods with all the provisions he needs to survive, Mark said. The woman in the group was the slowest, so she set the pace on the climb. I forced myself to walk slow, and I noticed I didn't get as tired walking from the bottom to the top of a mountain. I said, "Boy, that is it. That's the whole key to this gig." Mark believes that poor pacing drives many people off the trail. They end up hating to hike. To become an efficient backpacker, Mark recommends reading as much as you can about backpacking. He also suggests studying other people on the trail. Most of the best hikers do just that, he said. It requires humility, but they refine their techniques and learn about the most practical gear. Most people on the trail learn through trial and error. They go through a lot of changes, adjusting their pack and things like that. You've got to eat your pride and say, "I made a mistake." I've seen guys walk in the worst boots because they paid $200 for them. They're custom made, so they have to be good. I don't care if bones are sticking out from my skin. These boots have to be good. It's ridiculous. You have to stay flexible and open to new ideas. Mark warns that many people trim their pack weight too much. Life is like a string on an instrument, he said. If you've got it wound too tight, you're off. If you've got it too loose, you're off. There's a happy medium where it's absolutely perfect. Cut too much, he said, and you'll feel great for the 10 hours hiking with only 5 pounds on your back. But he said, when you get to camp at night, you're going to be hurting. You're not going to sleep comfortably. You don't have a good mattress because you wanted to save 6 ounces. Every person has to find out where the perfect pitch is for him. Mark didn't find the perfect pitch until his second through hike, when he hiked alone. That's when I concentrated more on the weight I was carrying. I went down too low. I wasn't comfortable in camp. It depends what you're trying to do. If you're trying to enjoy hiking 20 to 25 miles a day, then you're going to want to carry a certain amount of weight. If you want to hike 50 miles a day, then it's important to carry less weight. So I figured it out. I balanced it out to where it was good for me. On his first through hike, Mark actually gained 6 pounds of body weight. Most hikers lose between 10 and 25 pounds on a through hike, and 45 is not unprecedented. Less than 5% of through hikers gain weight during their hike. A marathon runner, Mark was running 10 to 12 miles a day, 5 days a week, and 14 to 17 miles the other 2 days. He was in such terrific physical shape that his through hike was easier than his other activities. It was a vacation, he said. Not everyone will be in shape to run a marathon before starting the AT, nor need he be. Still, Mark advocates getting in the best shape possible before hitting the trail. He finds that running improves stamina and toughens feet. Once your feet are tough, he suggests wearing 2 pairs of nylon socks while hiking. The socks are cheap, dry quickly, and reduce blister-causing friction. Each pair of socks lasted him 1,000 miles. He suggests clipping toenails weekly to avoid wear and tear on socks. He also recommends having sufficient time and money so you don't have to rush and scrimp. Mark is security conscious on the trail. The rule of thumb is no matter how many miles you've walked, if you get to a shelter and something tells you this is not kosher, whether it's raining or snowing, just go on. He's also wary of telling anybody where he's spending the night, unless he knows the person well. He saw the trail change over the 7 years he hiked it. It's gone from a country lane to a super highway, he said. By his 5th through hike, more odd characters were along the trail. He reminisced wistfully about the early days on the AT. When the first guys hiked the trail, there were no facilities for them. That was hard. Now it's the opposite. Now you've got basically hot dog stands on the trail. There was a time with a happy medium, a nice amount of outside help, but the trail wasn't ridiculous either. Now you've got some nice shelters on the trail, no leaky roofs. The water sources are clean. It's a trade-off. Mark came up with the trail name Second Wind on his second through hike. The name has multiple meanings. There's a spiritual reference to his being a born-again Christian, as well as references to his second through hike and to the idea of pacing himself on climbs. Like most repeat through hikers, Mark learned to cultivate a proper trail attitude. I learned a long time ago, he said. You never argue with the logic of the trail. It's a losing battle. You have to be flexible. You're not going to change the trail. You have to do the changing. You have to adapt to whatever the trail is. Mark is a purist who believes in hiking every inch of the trail, even the least attractive sections. You need a backdrop, he says. If all you have is Mount Katahdin and Smoky Mountains, you don't know what great is. It's like having a white star in with 50 other white stars. It doesn't have any significance. The Italians used to drink bitter wine. They'd take a shot of it before they'd eat dinner. It's garbage. But everything you eat afterwards is twice as sweet because you have that bitter taste in your mouth. On the AT, the rainy days help you appreciate the sunny days. If you just have the sunny days, you take them for granted. You're going to have to hike when you're no longer having fun. That may be through 3 months of smouldering, bug-infested, God-forsaken weather. It could be raining every day. But you've got to always keep your goal in mind to hike the Appalachian Trail. If you stick with that goal, you won't skip trail and you'll put up with what you've got to put up with. If you went to a store to buy something, wouldn't you want the best that you could get? When you talk to people and tell them, I hike the Appalachian Trail, they want to hear the best that they can get too. They don't want something that has holes in it. They want it to be pure. I'm not saying everybody accomplishes that, but that's what everybody should strive for. For Mark, the trail is not a way to elude problems back home. You can't avoid life by going on the trail. It's a change and you have to adapt to it, but essentially you do the same things on the trail as you do in everyday life. Do you think your needs have changed because you're on the AT? You no longer need companionship. You no longer need water. You no longer need shelter. What sends most people off the trail is their inability to deal with themselves. Mark said, when you're with other people, you don't have to think about yourself. You have diversions. But when you're alone, you have to face it. Hey, I'm not in shape. I'm not prepared for this trip. There's nothing to take your mind off it. The loudest thing on the trail is your thoughts. You can't avoid them. There's no place to go, no place to hide. Rocks and trees get monotonous after a while. Your thoughts are always there, always eating away at you. Loneliness is one of the major reasons people get off the trail. After 30 days of being on the trail, I no longer thought of things at home. I thought of things that happened to me on the trail. For the first 30 days, I'd be thinking about my car or going fishing. After 30 days, all I thought about was that shelter back there. After 90 days, I felt a oneness with the woods and the trail. I realised when I called home I was no longer part of their life either. I was a guy who was away hiking. One last piece of advice from Mark comes in the form of a cautionary tale. On his first through hike, he hiked 20 to 25 miles a day. In the presidential range of the White Mountains, he pushed too hard one day, doing the kind of thing that has hurt many hikers so much that they had to drop off the trail. With a partner, Mark walked 27 miles from the hostel at Crawford Notch to Pinkham Notch, one of the AT's toughest stretches. They had been planning to stay in Madison Hut and arrived there at dinner time, but the hut was full with a camp group, and Mark and his partner were turned away. That left him a rugged 7-mile descent to Pinkham, much of the way in complete darkness. We were beyond tired, Mark said. The adrenaline started to flow and we were running on raw energy. We were walking by feel and we were walking fast. We got to Pinkham at 10. That was my longest day. It was ridiculous. My knees hurt for a month after that.